Thank you everybody for coming. Particular thank you to a whole range of speakers tonight. Let me just explain a little bit about the origin of this session. There's two organisations that have come together to put this on, but actually several more as well, who are joining to make it a really rich and an occasion that really sort of turns into action. Green Christian has been hosting workshops in the series called, well, through the program called Joy in Enough, for every kind of once a month on Wednesdays for several years now. And I have the privilege of being one of their group members, and we look at we provide a platform for new economic thinking that's about developing an economic system that doesn't have the inherent problems that we have with the neoliberal order that we currently have, including, of course, its impact on the environment. So Green Christian is the host tonight. I work for the Catholic Diocese of Nottingham, and there's friends here from not just from Nottingham, but other parts of the Catholic Church. Good to see you. And as you all know, this year is the Jubilee Year, the 2025 Jubilee Year for Catholics around the world. And this seemed to be the perfect opportunity to explore how Jubilee teachings from which I'll just briefly introduce in a few moments, challenge the economic system that we live with, and often we can't critique because we're just so close to it, and we're sort of like fish swimming in the goldfish bowl. So hopefully you'll come away from today with some fresh eyes to see the world and how it's organized, and a fresh critique from an ancient perspective, sourced from the book of Exodus. When I thought, well, who's the best person to explore this for us and to introduce the challenges that the Jubilee thinking presents to us, I thought of the Economy of Francesco Foundation, and I thought particularly of Luigino, and I'm delighted that both Luigino and his colleague Henrique are here tonight, and they'll take the floor to begin with. Thank you, both of you, for what you've prepared, for what you'll be sharing. I won't prejudge what that's going to be, but I will in a moment explain how the whole session will sort of hang together. One other factor at play, of course, tonight, and particularly tonight, is that this is the 10th anniversary of the publication of Laudato Si. It's difficult to underestimate the impact that Laudato Si has had, certainly on the Catholic Church, in terms of legitimizing and giving a warrant to environmental action. And I think, we've lost Pope Francis, sadly, but Laudato Si, in 50 years' time, I'm confident will be seen as his greatest legacy, and the thing that has really turned the evolving stream of Catholic social teaching towards what he called integral ecology, a complete sort of meshing together of environmental and social good. So we're here to celebrate that as much as anything else, and I think anyone who's got an interest and observes the world of not just environmental but economic will be aware of the impact that Laudato Si has had, and the depth of challenge and fresh thought that it's brought. Let me start with a prayer, and this is actually the closing words of Laudato Si, and it seems to be a fitting place to start tonight. So, just a few closing words of quite a long prayer that's offered to people, to Christians around the world, not just Catholics, but for all of us to pray together. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love. for all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. The poor and the earth are crying out, O Lord, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. Praise be to you. Laudato Si. Amen. So let me just navigate you through what we'll be doing over the next hour and a bit, hour and a half, 2 hours, in fact. I'll introduce the other partners that are joining us tonight from the organisations. Just to say thank you for coming, the 6 of you, and we'll hear more from them later. I'll just say a few words about the biblical sort of background of Jubilee. Only a few, because I don't want to steal the words from Luigino. But just to put it in a bit of kind of dynamic context for the occasion, the drama of this year as the Jubilee Year. And then I'll invite Professor Luigino Bruni, who I'll introduce a little more later, to tell us a little, to give us a keynote talk for about 20 minutes of unpacking what Jubilee could mean to us and what challenge it can offer us for making a better world, creating the kind of vision that Laudato Si and the Jubilee offer to us. And one of the things we talked about when Luigino and I met was the importance of making space for younger voices. And Henrique, I don't want to, pigeonhole you as being the voice of the youth, but Henrique will be able to respond to something of what Henrique says, and also to introduce us to the work of the Economy of Francesco Foundation, particularly in this Jubilee year. So welcome to you again, Henrique, if I don't mention, if I forget that later. We'll have to have a short break after Henrique's spoken, and in this time, and in fact, all the way through, you're welcome to make notes of questions, post them in the chat, particularly perhaps if you want to sort of reflect on what we hear said, put them in the chat during the break, just a 10-minute break. That'll be at about 7:15. And we'll have 20 minutes then to put your questions to our 2 speakers. And also there'll be a chance for our partner organisations to share something of what Jubilee means to them, and how their work embodies the principles that we're going to be exploring tonight. And then we'll have the chance for 20 minutes to go into breakout rooms, pretty short breakout rooms, but just enough, I hope. I'm sorry to everybody that's contributing that we weren't able to give you longer. To say a little bit more about what your organisations do, and perhaps if anybody goes into the group with questions that you want to share with the people that you've chosen to join, that will be a good time to do it. You can make that choice literally just before you go into the room, so that'll be about 8 o'clock that we'll offer you those choices. And that's pretty well it, really. But let me just say, thank you to Ian Christie, who's here from the Centre for Understanding Sustainable Prosperity, a long-term partner of Green Christian and its Join Enough project. And Ian particularly has given us a great depth of wisdom, not only from him, but the whole research team based at the University of Surrey that's looking at alternative systems for sustainable economics. Tim Cooper, who's a trustee of Green Christian and is leading the Sustainable Food Project, and you'll have a chance to hear a little bit more about what that is up to later. Thanks, Tim, for coming. Miriam, I'm really delighted to have Miriam here because modern slavery is not necessarily the kind of issue that Green Christian would normally cover, but it's certainly something that's of concern to us in the Diocese of Nottingham and a lot of dioceses around the country. Learning how to be eyes and ears for modern slavery and human trafficking in our neighbourhoods. And this is fundamentally a Jubilee issue because it's all about the freedom from oppression and slavery, which Exodus invited us to. So welcome, Miriam. Phoebe Worthington from CAFOD will tell us something about, if you're in the breakout room with her, about the CAFOD's campaigning, particularly in this Jubilee year for the relief of debt, which is not a done job. You know, many of us have been campaigning for that for years. You'll remember it's sort of kicked off several years ago, but the work still needs to be done and continues. New challenges continue to arise. So Phoebe will introduce you, give you the opportunity to find out what those new challenges are. Naomi is here from Christians Against Poverty, and I've come across Christians Against Poverty because they do some really useful, valuable partnering work with churches at local level in helping people navigate their way out of debt and poverty and build their own capacity and skills for managing their finances as well. There's a whole range of training that's on offer that's very high quality and accessible, easily done, easily taken up by churches. And Naomi will tell us more about that. And last but not least, John Paul Takei, who again has been a long-standing friend, both of any Catholics around the country who care about the environment, producing some really creative and imaginative resources to equip parishes to act on environmental concerns and to put it at the heart of their mission. And also a long-term friend of Green Christian as well. So a very warm welcome to, and a big thank you to all of you. Let me just then share my screen, and I will just give a little bit of context to the Jubilee and Jubilee without a definite article. Jubilee as a teaching, as something that we are invited to live as a society. So many of you will recognise the logo for this year. This year, every 25 years is a Jubilee in the Catholic Church. We like to do them twice as much as the ancient Hebrews did, and often more besides as well. There'll be another one coming for 2033, actually, with the 2000th anniversary of the crucifixion. This is, let me just play, hopefully there's a bit of sound here, and you can hear the shofar, which announces the 49th year of Sabbath, of Jubilee. Let me just try and get that started. Where is it? The blowing of the ram's horn that announces that first advent of every Jubilee. So the teaching in Leviticus, and maybe this is what perhaps Luigino will sort of draw us further into, is to consecrate every 50th year and use it as a proclamation of liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants, and in fact not only its inhabitants but for the earth as well. So do not sow or reap, so the land lies fallow, it rests, it regenerates. And this is a whole sort of time of reset and new beginnings. And I think it's particularly closely related to the theme of Laudato Si through the figure of Saint Francis. So there's one particular teaching of St. Francis I'll mention, and I'll pass on to Luigino in a minute. is his teaching about what's called in the Latin, in his early rule, sine proprio, living without owning, or even living without ownership. So what Francis was about really was shedding any claim on to property, to the fencing in, the enclosure of goods. He saw everything as a common good, whether it's objects, nature, people, or even the self. And it's both a very practical teaching, but a deeply spiritual and transforming conversion that he was inviting us to. So many things to celebrate tonight. And I'll turn around to introduce Luigino now. Thank you, Luigino. So let me just say a little bit of what it says on your website, and then you can sort of introduce yourself a little bit more if you'd like to as well. So Luigino calls himself an economist. He is an economist. He doesn't just call himself that. And historian of economic thought. But he's no mere economist. He rather humbly says he's got growing interests in ethics, biblical studies, and literature. Actually, I think we would call him a polymath. And it's very refreshing, I think, for people with an economic background to have such a broad sphere of interests. And as he says himself, those interests have grown over the years to the point of changing the nature of his profession, which is constantly evolving. And would that most economists or other economists would see that the profession of economics is evolving. It needs to evolve perhaps faster, and certainly the work of the Economy of Francesco Foundation, of which Luigino as vice president is at the forefront of that evolution. So he talks about well-being, happiness, reciprocity, market, gift, gratuitousness. And these are all words that really bring the full meaning to economic science, so that it's what I would say is no longer the dismal science that it's been described as, but it's a joyful art. Luigino, welcome, and would you like to take it from here and tell us what you have to share?
Yes. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you to the all organizers, to the Church of Nottingham, your staff, everybody who allows this moment of communion, of sharing among us. I have prepared a PowerPoint with hoping that will be easier to follow, also because my English is not very good. I'm very strong Italian accent that some people call a mafia movie accent when I talk in English. But anyway, probably the PowerPoint will help a bit. I will follow quite faithfully because the time is also short. We have to to keep in 20 minutes, around 20 minutes, my presentation. Okay, let's start with this presentation is divided in two parts. Part one is more about general reflection about Jubilee, the biblical roots, I would say the biblical roots of the Jubilee, also in particular the economic and social roots of the Jubilee, because actually the Jubilee was basically an economic and social matter in the Bible. In the Catholic Church, after year 1300 with Boniface VIII, something changed in the link to the Bible was not so clear up to the last Jubilee, starting from 1975 in particular, with the Great Jubilee of John Paul II, and this Jubilee, the economic, social, biblical dimensions was much more emphasized, but in the past was not so clear the link between the Catholic Jubilee and the biblical Jubilee, because in the biblical Jubilee there is not the idea of peregrinage, that it was important in the Bible, but not exactly for the Jubilee. It was not the idea of individual confession, individual indulgence, but was something about collective action, was a social event, was a new covenant, as I will try to show. And then actually the three elements, as Paul already mentioned, involved in the Jubilee were the liberation of the rescue of the slaves, the land that was returned to the original owners, also to leave the land breathing without cultivation, and that were cancelled, were released. And then was in order to understand, as we know, the Jubilee, we have to understand the sabbatical year, because the Jubilee is a square sabbatical year, 7 by 7. And there was a special, extraordinary sabbatic year. Then in order to understand the sabbatic year, we have to understand Shabbat. And then the heart, the core, the spiritual, social, ethical center of the Jubilee is the culture of Shabbat. It's impossible to understand the Jubilee in the Bible without understanding Shabbat. And then debt, I don't read the quotation, also because Leviticus have been already read. The Leviticus is the basic, the most important basis, but the sabbatical year is also in the Deuteronomy and also other books of in particular the Pentateuch. Debt, land, and slaves. And then in the Jubilee, actually, time is superior to space. That is the core of the Pope Francis also Laudato Si. Time is superior to space. Time is greater than space. Times come first with respect to space. And then there is a sort of seal of gratuitousness on one day of the week. If you put that, then we free all our time from the absolute predatory dominion of man. If in one day we are different in the week, if in one day your ox, your donkey may rest, and the son of your maidservant, the stranger, may be refreshed, then if in that day we will be all equal, if in that day there will be a cosmic, a universal fraternity, a sorority with all creatures, then that is a prophetic day. That is the eschaton day. That is the vocation, is the prophecy of the whole Bible. The Shabbat is present, not, as we see in the second part, not only in the Pentateuch, but we find Shabbatical culture as a soul of the whole Bible. Old and New Testament, even though in the New Testament. Then all goods are commons. That is the idea. You are not the only owner. You are not the predator. You are not the boss of your goods, because there is a universal destination of goods that are more important than the private property. Then allow radical gratuitousness in the earth. All earth belongs to Adonai. That is the main message of the sabbatic year and the Jubilee. Then if we forget, if there is an eclipse of the seventh day, if we forget there is a different, a free day that is not under our control, our power, the earth no longer breathes. Animals and plants are only valuable if they can be exploited for our profit. Foreigners never become part of the family. Leaders are never followers. Work is never brother work, but as a Francis, but only slave or master. And then is the distance between the law of the sabbatical year and the law of the other 6 years. The distance between the first 6 days of the week and the 7th day is the first indicator of the ethical and spiritual capital of a civilization, of every civilization. Is the ethical gap between the citizen and the stranger. Is the gap between our right and the right of every creature. Is the gap between the land I use today and the one I leave to children of all, not just mine, that reveal the moral quality of human society. And then the idea of the 7th time, as you know, that was the prophecy of Gioacchino da Fiore, that died when Francesco d'Assisi was just a teenager, just starting his experience. And then this idea there will arrive a certain time, the time of the Spirit, as we know, the year of the Spirit, Gioacchino de Fiore, that was so important in the first generation of Franciscan. You know, John Ulivi, other Franciscan of 13th century, they were convinced that Francesco was the prophet of the seventh time, or the prophet of the year of the Spirit. And also in practice, the part of the garden that Francis said to leave free and uncultivated, you know, in the rule of St. Francis, there is how to cultivate the garden. In every garden of the convent, there will be a free zone, really free zone, uncultivated, because it was a space for birds and wild animals. That was the idea of the seventh day. You are not the owner of all. You are just something. In this gap, there is the quality, the chance of our humanity to survive, in particular today. Laudato Si. And then even Jesus, we know, Jesus was a polemic, was a bit critic towards the rule of Shabbat, as you know, but not because in his time has become something very legalist, formal, but because for Jesus every day is Shabbat. That is the idea, not just one, because every day is the kingdom of heaven. You know, this is the only passage of Luke, of the Gospel, that is considered to be a sort of sabbatic year. Probably was a Jubilee in that Luke 4, 18, 19. But this idea, a year of the Lord favor, aphesis in Greek was the word that in the seventh, the Bible, or the Greek Bible of the Old Testament was translated the Jubilee. With the aphesis is the same word that used Luke, was a year of liberation, then a Jubilee year, because the kingdom of heaven is a perpetual Shabbat, a seventh time that becomes all new time. And then when the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, assigns to the sabbatical year, there should be no poor among you, Deuteronomy, in the new community of Jesus, in the church, in the kingdom of heaven, will become the rule of the ordinary life. There was no needy person among them, Acts of Apostles. And then the economy of the kingdom is a sabbatical economy. That is my first point. And then going to our capitalism, in particular the 21st capitalism, is an anti-Shabbat. Because if the West had taken the Jubilee culture seriously, we would not have generated capitalism. It would be very different. Let's go back to this famous sentence of Walter Benjamin, this great philosopher that in 1921, 1 century ago more, in his pamphlet Capitalism as a Religion, I quote, "Capitalism is the celebration of a cult without pity. There are no working days. There is no day that is not a holiday, in the sense of unfolding of every sacred pomp, of the extreme effort of the venerable." That is Benjamin. This is a new religion, is a cult without metaphysics, is definition of capitalism. That according to Benjamin, capitalism was born parasistically upon Christianity. Then capitalism knows no rest. Labor never casts off its joke. No hour, no day, no season is different from the others. The earth is just a resource to be exploited, maybe if become rare earth. The presence of the Jubilee Year is the Bible main anti-idolatrous device. Because a civilization that consumes time treats and consumes time as a commodity is technically idolatrous. Because it makes itself as the only God, the only priest, and the only faithful. Capitalism is idolatry, in my opinion, because it has marked the definitive death of the seventh day of the week. He has devoured the Shabbat and Sunday, transforming them into the weekend, put it together, with the apotheosis of consumerism. Then I'm going to the part 2 in the remaining minutes. It's about a particular episode of the sabbatic culture, the Jubilee culture in the Bible. In my website, there will be 8 articles on episode of the Jubilee culture on the Bible. Is free if you want to see them. But one of these studies about an episode of Jeremiah. That's quite interesting, also for the implications for our time, because the sabbatical and Jubilee culture informs the entire biblical humanism, not just the Deuteronomy or the Leviticus. And then in biblical history, we find many moments, also in the books, many pages where you can find Jubilee culture. One is in the book of the prophet Jeremiah. Also because without prophets, it's impossible to understand the Jubilee culture. Jubilee culture is a prophetic culture. Then the prophets are the masters, are the teachers of the Jubilee culture. You find in many prophets that. And then we are, this episode is in the chapter 20, in the chapter 34 of Jeremiah book, but also there is some reference to that episode, historical episode in the second book of Kings. We are in Jerusalem, which has been besieged for some time by Nabucodonosor, the king of Babylon, the Babylon army. A siege that will lead to the great destruction of the city and the temple of 587 before Christ, the huge destruction, the huge, tremendous tragedy of the Bible, of the history of the people of Israel. The kingdom of Judah has already lost its autonomy. The king was Zedekiah. That was not a good king. The definition of this king in the second book of Kings did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. This king Zedekiah was the last king of the Judah kingdom. After that, there was destruction. It was the end. Then this king, small and weak, during this long month of siege of Jerusalem, made an important Jubilee sabbatic gesture, act. I quoted, because King Zedekiah had made a covenant to proclaim the freedom to the slave, each of them to release his Jewish male and female slaves, so that no one would force any of his countrymen to remain in bondage. All the princes, this is the law, the decree of this Zedekiah, all the princes and the people who had entered into the covenant consented to set their slaves, both men and women, free, so they would no longer force into slavery. That was the law, the decision of Zedekiah, a sort of extra rite, extra 50 years jubilee, was an extra jubilee, a sort of last resort before the destruction, a sort of last possibility. And Zedekiah made a pact with the people very close to a sabbatical year. And then was a very important covenant, similar to the Abrahamic covenant, passing between parts of the quartered calf. It was concerned in particular with the liberation of slaves. What is interesting that in that culture, the biblical culture, you cannot remain slave forever, only for 6 years, not forever, because you are first brother and then slave. And the only way to become slaves in that period of the Bible was for debt. There was not other way of becoming slaves. It was just an economic matter. And then today, actually, we are not anymore able to keep this prophecy of you are not slave forever, because in economic and financial matters, we are not able to live in our capitalism, this culture of Jubilee culture. Then, going back to Jeremiah, the people obey to this decree, to this law of the king. All the officials and all the people who are entered into the covenant agreed to set their male and female slave free, so that they would not make them continue in bondage. Then people obeyed. They did that. Then everything seems to be moving towards a real conversion, metanoia. The slaves are really set free after so many past failures, because it's very probable that actually during the history of the people of Israel, they never applied concretely the Jubilee, because the prophets continue to say, you don't set free the slave, you don't make the land breathing, you don't relieve the debt. But that moment before the destruction of Nabucodonosor seems to be the only. But which is the twist, the turning point? Here the twist. Those liberators took back the male and female slaves they had set free and brought them back into slavery. Then it was a sort of anti-conversion. They are faced with an anti-repentance, a perverse convention that cancels out the first good conversion. The people, the patrons, change their minds and re-establish the original iniquitous condition. Slave became again slave. We don't know the reason. Probably the main cause was a temporary loosening of Nabucodonosor siege. A temporary tactical retreat produced a new wave of nationalistic ideology from the false prophets who had always fought Jeremiah. The false prophets was the really enemy of Jeremiah. In fact, in that moment, we know from the book of history, Nabucodonosor suspended the siege of Jerusalem. And then the easing of the great fear was therefore enough to violate that pact of liberation, to deny the alliance they made. The slaves were freed for a moment, the dream vanished, they returned to the house of slavery. Why? That is very, very important episode, because in every pact, the crucial element is time. The pact is an asset of duration. We can and must say to each other on our wedding day forever, with all the sincerity and truth of which we are capable, sincerely. But we can truly repent and promise to change our life, to say it to ourselves and to each other many times. But only God and His true prophets can change the reality of things by saying them. But for us, saying the word is not enough to create a new reality. That word must become flesh, individually and collectively, and therefore needs time. But the most serious and tremendous perverse regrets are the collective ones coming to our society today. When a community or an entire generation renounces the words and gestures that their prophets had said and done in some shining moments of history. Afterwards, we raise walls that on a brighter day we had turned down. We close borders that on a shining day we had opened, and let children die within a mare nostrum, Mediterranean, that has become a mare monstrum. We invest again in weapons when one day we had reduced them to say peace. And then a fake loosening of the siege is enough for the false prophets to convince us and the boss that there is not a real climate crisis, that we are innocent, that the glaciers and rivers are to blame. A small change in mutual geopolitical interest was enough to erase words spoken after great collective wounds. And then to conclude, then we follow the Pied Pipers, the whole narratives about There is no need for a real conversion. And then again, Cain triumphs over Abel, fratricide over brotherhood, and so and so. And just to conclude, I think today we are in a moment of history when we can deny in few months, in few days, in few years, the conquest, the civilization conquest that we did in the last decades after wars, after fascism, after Nazi. And we go back into the street to hunt down those slaves we had freed in a better day. And then I want to conclude with a prayer that is my prayer. Come back, true prophets. Come back now, because the city is about to be destroyed again. Thank you. This is just some references if you want to read something more about that. In particular, in my website, you find free all my papers on Jubilee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luigino. That's a great challenge to constant vigilance. You highlighted the sort of the slow wave changes that happen over decades, and we can see that with the rise once again of nationalism in Europe and in the UK. But it also happens with every electoral cycle, and even with what we might have thought of as being a fairly inclusive government here in the UK, we're struggling with still that kind of the growth being the overriding imperative at all costs, and at certainly at cost of nature. So you've challenged us never to let up. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks to you.
Let me invite Henrique to come in as well now, and would you like to tell us a little bit about the work that you do and what you'll be doing over this Jubilee year?
Sure.
Thank you, Henrique.
Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting Luigino and also me to present a little bit very quickly about the Economy of Francesco and the brand new Economy of Francesco Foundation. Well, I work with intercultural communication, and today I'm responsible for communication, education, and culture in the EOF Foundation, the Economy of Francesco Foundation. I just simply wanted to highlight here that sometimes if I speak the acronym EOF, it means Economy of Francesco, because it's so natural for us that if I tell this, you already know what's about. Well, I will talk about the Economy of Francesco Foundation later. I would first reply to Professor Bruni's text, which is quite interesting. So thank you, Luigino, for this powerful and timely lecture. Well, I would like to offer a short reflection, not specifically from an academic perspective, but from the lived experience of someone who has walked with the Economy of Francesco since the beginning. Listening to Professor Bruni's lecture, I was deeply struck by how the Jubilee, as presented here, is not just a religious or symbolic concept. It is a powerful economic and prophetic vision, one that calls us to interrupt the logic of accumulation and domination, to remember that the earth is not ours to possess, and to believe that economic failure should never be a life sentence. These ideas are not distant from the Economy of Francesco reality. In fact, they are at the very heart of what we are trying to do, to reclaim the economy as a space of fraternity, something rooted in relationships and not exploitation. We have seen in practice how, as Pope Francis says, time is greater than space. Just as Professor Bruni reminded us, time has allowed this community to mature. What began as a one-time event became a journey, became friendship, became commitment. We often say that the Economy of Francesco is a movement of young economists, entrepreneurs, and change makers. But it is also a movement of people who believe that the Sabbath still speaks, who believe that the rhythm of Jubilee, its pauses, its restitutions, its radical resets, can help us find a new economic language. I was especially moved by the reflection on the false prophets, those who reassure us that everything can stay the same, who speak of peace while preparing for war, who deny the climate crisis while the earth cries out. I believe this is one of the greatest challenges we face today, and not only in the economy, but in culture and communication too. To discern voices, to listen again to true prophets among us, to hold firm to the visions we received, not in fear, but in moments of deep hope. And perhaps, as Professor Bruni suggested, our generation is also living through a kind of exile, ecological, social, and even spiritual. But exile can be a place of awakening, a place where new covenants are forged, where Jubilee becomes not only a command, but a path of return. This is the horizon we are walking toward in the Economy of Francesco, with all the fragility such a journey entails, and all the beauty too. And it's in that spirit that I now invite you to take a look at what's next. I will share my screen very quickly here. All right. Okay, so let me just check if it is. Okay, so you can see now. Perfect. Well, we're going to talk very quickly, contextualize what the Economy of Francesco and the Economy of Francesco Foundation are, to quickly talk about what's coming up. Well, the EOF Foundation was created in 2024 by key Franciscan institutions and under Pope Francis' guidance. Its purpose is to support and amplify the work of the global EOF community. It's not a top-down body, but a platform, a place to empower, coordinate, and expand existing and new projects. The EOF Foundation exists to serve a real living community. We are a global network of young change makers from over 100 countries who are reshaping the way we understand and live the economy. Our projects span education, research, local action, and innovation, from the 12 thematic villages to our schools, academy, summer school, and over 50 hubs worldwide. This timeline shows some milestones of how EOF has evolved from a papal invitation in 2019 into a global movement. And in 2024, we created the foundation to support this journey, one built step by step with youth and hope at its core. Now let's talk about the international event promoted by the EOF Foundation. Restarting the Economy, the EOF Global Event on the occasion of the Jubilee 2025. Let's have a quick look what it is and who promotes. As you already know, an international event promoted by the EOF Foundation. Our title for this year is Restarting the Economy. We'll talk about it very soon. The EOF Global Event on the occasion of the Jubilee. And the theme, Rethinking the Economy, Restoring Dignity and the Future. But before we move forward, let's pause for a second to honor Pope Francis. Well, just months ago, he left us with these words: be witnesses, do not be afraid, never grow tired of hoping. His voice, his gestures, his love for the poor and the earth, they remain with us. Now, with grateful hearts, we make a promise to carry on, to hope boldly, to walk together unafraid. This is his legacy, and we will be faithful to it. So, why restarting the economy? In this Jubilee Year 2025, and on the occasion of the 800th anniversary of the Canticle of the Creatures, the Economy of Francesco Foundation continues its commitment to offering, particularly to young economists, entrepreneurs, researchers, and changemakers worldwide, spaces for dialogue and reflection on contemporary economic challenges. The Jubilee 2025 represents a unique opportunity to reflect on major economic themes as an inspiration for a new economic paradigm. The Jubilee economy draws from three core biblical principles. First, rest for the land, respecting creation and allowing the earth to breathe. Second, freedom for the enslaved, ending cycles of exploitation and restoring dignity to labor. And third, debt cancellation, rejecting a system based on endless accumulation. In short words, short terms, it is an economy rooted in justice, mercy, and renewal. We also want to engage even more young people from more countries in this process for economic change. EOF is all about youth, and we need to provide more opportunities for them to contribute to shaping a new economy based on equity, sustainability, and inclusion. We also aim to strengthen and share experiences, ideas, and innovations, especially among younger generations. These efforts can help build an economy of life that works for the common good and meets the socio-economic challenges of different geographic regions while serving all humanity. Now let's take a look at this. Well, the restarting the economy is coming up. Let's try to understand and talk a little bit about the meaning behind this title and logo for this initiative. First of all, a wordplay, rest, because the Jubilee is a time for rest, for the land and the people, and also arting as a creativity for renewal. This is the core. This is in the core of this year's title. All right. So moving forward, the target audience of the event is primarily young people under the age of 40 who are engaged in one or more of these fields, studies and research in economics and related disciplines, such as university students, master's students, PhD candidates, young researchers, etc. Entrepreneurial activities, whether in established companies, startups, or those developing business projects, and the changemakers worldwide, promoters of initiatives serving the common good and fostering a fair, sustainable, and inclusive economy, through organizations, movements, lay groups, and civil society actors. Well, in short, all young people who feel the calling to change the world through the economy. For 3 days, some of the most influential international economists, entrepreneurs, and scholars will engage with young people through an innovative, participatory, inclusive, and interdisciplinary program addressing crucial topics for the future, including ecological debt, social justice, decent work, and many others. Well, let's take a very quick look at the event program.
Just briefly, if you could, Henrique, thank you.
Yes, for sure. The event will consist of 3 days of reflection and action with some of the world's leading economists and entrepreneurs. And the program will include some of these items you can see in the slide. Some of our speakers confirmed until May are, for example, Nobel laureates such as Esther Duflo, who will hold the preparatory online session a few weeks before the event. Economists and other experts such as Paolo Benanti, Jeffrey Sachs, and Jennifer Nedelsky, and many others. Well, all of these you can find in our website, okay? So restarting the economy will take place in Castel Gandolfo, close to Rome in Italy, in the Centro Mariapoli, which is in Castel Gandolfo from the 28th to the 30th of November. The participation fee covers meals, accommodation for the 3 days, as well as access to all program sessions and materials. And also, of course, it is possible to attend with your family, and also if you are over 40 years old. And also participation grants are available through an application process. The registration platform the registration platform is in our website from May to July 2025. Okay. And where to follow the updates on all of this? on our official channels, on newsletter, website, and social media. The following will also be published very soon: program updates, call for papers, and some contests we are preparing. And you can find us in all those social medias you can see there. So this is Restarting the Economy, an international event promoted by the EOF Foundation. I'm sorry to go over the time, and thank you all for your attention.
You. Thanks very much for the invitation, and I'm glad it extends to all of us. Not many of us can claim to be under 40, but thanks for the information, and thank you for the resistance movement, really, that you represent and that you're building. I think it's something that we can all feel that we support. So here we are. We're all back. Thanks very much, and we've got do type up any questions in the chat. I wonder. Peter, briefly, you've put in a question about something of Professor Bruni's work about the wound and the blessing. Would you just like to put your question to Luigino? You'll have to unmute. Everybody will have to unmute if you want to speak.
Well, thank you for Professor Bruni for the book, which I'm reading, I hope with profit, at the moment. Now, would you like to, in effect, commend the book to the meeting? I think for those of us who are involved in joy and enough, this is quite an important concept that you have presented to us in the book. That is to say that economic relations should be joyful rather than how they are experienced today as that which grinds us down. Nevertheless, there is an element of wound as well. And I suppose in all human relationships, there is always wound and blessing. Would you just like to enlarge a little on that? Because I'm finding the book very fruitful from the joy and enough point of view.
Don't forget to unmute, Luigino.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Just a few words, because as you know, that book is quite a starting point of my research, because it was a book originally 2007, and then in English 2012, but is the starting point of my research on biblical economics, because that is part of my present activity as a scholar. I wrote several books on economic, anthropological, social commentary to 10 or 12 books of the Bible, old, in particular Old Testament, but also New. Then the idea is the basic idea, the inspiration of the book is the fighting between Jacob and the angel in the book of Genesis, chapter 32. This is on the river Yabok. That is one of the most mythical, popular, also in the painting. Think about Rembrandt, famous, inspiring, mysterious episode in the Old Testament. Then when I reread that, I was very much impressed by a metaphor, that fighting as a metaphor, an allegory, parable of true human relations, because as you know, but that fighting was between men, that in Jewish was Ish, that was a man, and Jacob, the patriarch. Overnight, Jacob was alone. This man arrived. Then at the end of the fighting, the man became an angel God, and God. And the fighting, the Jacob was the winner, the angel was the loser. And the angel at the end of the night said, the dove, please let me go away, leave. And Jacob said, I leave you, I free you, only if you give me your blessing. And then this man, this God, gave the blessing to Jacob, and Jacob changed his name from Jacob to Israel. The name Israel came from this fighting, this struggle in night. Then, but Jacob was wounded in the leg, as we know, and probably remain wounded forever, according to the Jewish tradition, the rabbi tradition. Why was so important to me? Because this is a picture, a paradigm of true relations that are a mixture of blessing and wounds, or the openness to wounds. And then, being an economist, I describe the market economy, in particular capitalistic economy, that is a version of the market economy. So there are market economy, not capitalistic, as we know, but the capitalistic economy is an attempt to separate blessing from wounds, because contract is a huge immunity mechanism for avoiding people touching one another. Then that reduces the wounds, but also the joy of blessing, the joy of the encounter, the joy of face-to-face bodily encounters among people. That is the gist, the center of my research, of my book. But thank you for thank you for your question, Peter.
Thank you. It's almost as though he planted the question. So please do, yeah, order it, not on Amazon, but from some other ethical supplier. Thank you, Luigino. There's a heartfelt comment from Andrew about does all this matter? I hope you don't mind me speaking for you, Andrew, but given how far advanced the climate crisis is and the serious situation that we're in a kind of an emergency situation. How do you respond, Luigino, in framing your advocacy for a new economy in the context of you know, as Robbie responded to Andrew's comment, the flight to technological fixes and simple solutions, and I would add kind of fascist solutions. How do you respond to that within the framework that you're offering to the serious situation that we're in?
Yes. Of course, to talk about communion, jubilee, sabbatic economy, Shabbat, gratuitousness in today's context of wars, of nationalism, of this religion of leadership I'm very scared about this inundation of leadership curses all over the world, because it's transforming democracy in a leaderocracy. Then without any intermediate bodies, only leaders, people. I'm very scared about this. Anyway, this is just then to talk about what I mentioned just very quickly. Also, Henrique, the Economy of Francesco, that is of course Francesco Pope, but also Francesco of Assisi. To talk about fraternity, sorority, brotherhood, sisterhood today, no? But that is the destiny of Christianity since 2000 years, to talk about fraternity, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God in a world that was doing exactly the opposite. Of course, I'm here today. I was so explicit because I'm not in a stock exchange meeting in London or in Milan or in Frankfurt, but I'm in a Christian meeting of the Church of Nottingham, where I think we still believe that there should be possible to imagine an economy inspired by the gospel. Should be possible, at least as a prophecy, as a salt in the mass, as a prophetic approach to say debt, slaves that continue to be there. Now in Italy, I'm working against gambling, that is an industry, immense industry of consuming poor people, no, for profit of multinationals. Then to resist, to try to say, and then because I'm not convinced that capitalism is the incarnation of the gospel, is the final perfect incarnation of the gospel humanism. I don't belong to the Michael Novak or the Syriac or people saying that there is no better world than capitalism for Christianity. I think that we are still wandering the promised land. We are not reached yet the humanism of the gospel. Then my role as a Christian, as an Christian economist, or at least an economist Christian, I don't know what is first Christian, I know that we are a very little minority. We are more and more minority. We are not anymore in the Christianity, in the Christianitas. But I think to claim for poor, to claim for the commons, to claim for the common good, I think is much more needed now in this time of wars, in the winds of wars, in the nationalism, populism, than in the past. And then finally, which is the strategy, I think, an important strategy, is to study seriously economics. That is the strategy. The Economy of Francesco has also an academy of almost 50 young PhD students all over the world studying seriously economics, and then to try to change economics, because it's too easy to change a science that you don't know, because you just talk about I don't know, ethics or religion or philosophy. To be serious economist, to be well done scholars, and then to try to dialogue. But I think that the kingdom of heaven is not yet arrived on the earth, and there is not a new there is no Christianity without a new economy, because economy is the first language of the kingdom of God. Because it's about poverty, it's about slaves, it's about justice, it's about law, and then is the kingdom of heaven is that, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've partly answered a question about how the church should give leadership for this task. I think that was in your response. But there's also a question about the academy. So you're, I can't quite track it down here, but it's oh yes, Mark is asking how to revamp the teaching of economics in universities. Now, this is something close to your heart and also Henrique's, no doubt. What needs to be done there?
Yes.
And what's the state of play? Yes,
in Economy of Francesco, we organized some workshop about the change of curricula in the training of a new economist from many perspectives. One very important perspective is the environment, in particular the teaching of commons theory, because at the present state, in any university of the world, in any economics faculty or business school, we teach private goods as the rule, that everything is about private goods. If remain some hours at the end of the semester, we dedicate a couple of hours or a couple of days to the public goods, and maybe one hour to the commons, the tragedy of commons, because the idea is that the most important, the normal goods are the private one, that are what we know, pen, pencil, clothes, so and so, and the commons are the exception. We have to actually to put upside down this idea, to start with the commons, that is the core of economics today, the climate, the pollution, the war, the peace, the pandemic, everything is about commons, because we are interrelated every day in every kind of consumption and production. And then to consider the private goods as an exception, actually the opposite. But that is, of course, a revolution in the textbooks that are already, as John Maynard Keynes, your compatriot, said, economists, politicians are slaves of past dead economists that wrote textbooks that we studied today, but they were written 10 or 20 years ago. But we really need a change in programs, in the paradigm, putting the commons, not only environment commons. My commons, main commons are trust, social capital, spiritual capital, of course, natural capital, virtues as a capital, so and so. It's not just a matter of the environment. The environment is important, but not all commons are natural commons.
Thank you. Given the time, perhaps we all segue into the next section, and actually this is the perfect segue to invite Ian Christie to come in. So I'll invite all of our breakout room speakers to share a little bit about what they do and anything that they might have picked up from what you said. But Ian's in the perfect position to comment on certainly the leadership that CUSP is giving to this task of reforming economic learning. So Ian, over to you for a minute or two.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and evening, everyone. And thank you very much for the chance to take part. And it's a pleasure to hear Luigino and Henrique there. And I'm delighted to say I endorse everything they've said, and it all rings bells, especially about the urgent need to reform economics curricula in our universities, and to some degree in think tanks as well, I think. I've just been teaching our Masters of Business Administration students, and also our Masters and undergrad students on ecological economics. And we do exactly what Luigino was recommending. We start with the commons. This comes as a revelation to the MBA students who haven't heard about this for most of their modules. And I make my annual plea to the MBA administrators to make the module on sustainability and ecological economics compulsory. And they say, well, think about it. But that's a work in progress. Anyway, what I want to do is just say a little bit, and I'm mindful of time, about the work of CUSP, the Centre for Understanding Sustainable Prosperity, because it does fit in very, very well with a lot of what we've heard from Luigino and Henrique. And I really hope that some CUSP researchers can be present at the conference in November, which sounds perfect. Now, CUSP I would see as a secular counterpart to everything that's been talked about so far this evening. It's almost like a secular redescription of what's been said to us about the Jubilee economics, the Franciscan economics, and Sabbath economics, which of course Pope Francis was attempting to wrap into a bigger idea, integral ecology, which I think was a mighty thing to do, and I really hope the new Pope will continue on that course. CUSP would completely endorse all of the messages that we've heard about the challenges for capitalism, the challenges of restarting our understanding of the economy. For those who don't know it, CUSP was founded by Professor Tim Jackson, author of Prosperity Without Growth, and his latest book, which I commend to you, is called The Care Economy. The messages from CUSP are really that we should be focusing on economics and economic policy, which does not make the mistake of identifying prosperity with growth. It doesn't make the mistake of identifying consumerism with well-being. It doesn't assume that we need to fixate on growth in order to flourish. And it argues further that the growth economy as we currently got it is undermining two things. First of all, our ecological life support systems, but also our social support systems. And in particular, it's inimical, so Tim argues in his latest book, to the very idea of care. And I think he makes a very powerful case that that's true. I think I would love to see CUSP come into closer contact with the kind of work that was described to us by Luigino, in particular by Henrique. And I will do my best within the network to promote that. In the little time I've got left, I just want to say how I might respond to the message that we've heard from our two speakers about what we might do, because I think there is an enormous amount of agreement on the diagnosis of the problems and the prescription of what we need to do in very broad terms concerning concepts and values. But what might we do by way of action? Well, I think the concept of Jubilee calls on us to think of two groups. First of all, the faithful. what are we doing in order to live out an example of Jubilee economics, Franciscan values in our own lives? I think the onus is on us. If we're going to persuade anyone else, we have to work on ourselves and be true imitators of Christ and joyful incarnations of what a sharing economy should be all about and what Jubilee should be all about. Christians are not very good at setting a great example that makes the rest of society think, I want to be like them. And we need to do this very urgently. The other group I think we ought to think about are the rich and the powerful, who of course were the targets of the words of the prophets that Luigino was pointing out. And this is a good moment to read the great book by the late lamented Walter Brueggemann, The Prophetic Imagination, all about the assault by the Hebrew prophets on what Brueggemann called the royal consciousness of greed and self-assertion and the godless will. And it rings a lot of bells in our current age. What would prophets be doing? For a start, they'd be pointing at the rich and powerful and condemning them in really compelling ways. And I don't think we have enough of that. But they might be inspiring a bit of ecological conversion, to use Pope Francis's wonderful term. They might be working with the groups that we can already see among the rich and the powerful, who are beginning to become deeply uneasy about the impacts of the growth economy on our life support systems, ecological and social. And I'm thinking there of groups like the patriotic millionaires. Don't laugh, there is such a group of millionaires and billionaires who basically are saying, so far without much response to governments, you need to tax the likes of us much more. They are aware that the top 10% globally, which includes all of us on this call, and especially the top 1%, and especially within that the top 0.1%, have gained most of the benefits from growth for 40 years now. And we can easily afford, and in fact, we urgently need to do it anyway from the point of view of long-term self-interest. We urgently need to lead by moral example. And there's an interesting academic literature which is beginning to emerge on that from another group that I'm associated with called CAST, the Centre for Climate and Social Transformation, where some very interesting recent work has been done on public demand for our public leaders, business leaders, celebrities, people in top positions in institutions of all kinds to lead by ecological example. And there's good reason to think that would be picked up. So those are my responses. But thank you very much to.
Thank you. I'm glad you made them, and I purposely gave you more time than our other respondents, because I know you've worked and you've thought very deeply about these things, and you are yourself a prophet of these issues. Can I turn to Tim as well for perhaps a briefer response?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was just reflecting on much of what's been said, and very inspiring, but in some ways quite depressing. I speak as an economist myself. Well, it's one who did an economics degree some, almost 50 years ago now. And as I put in the chat, one name that hasn't been mentioned is Schumacher, and he's hardly ever mentioned these days. And I don't know why, because it seems to me that two of the things that he was particularly concerned about, namely scale and technology, are both at the heart of the issues that we're seeking to address. And in terms of restarting the economy, unless I think we address scale, and in particular what economists refer to as economies of scale, in other words, the more that you buy or sell, the cheaper the price, hence growth. And unless we address ownership, in particular, why a need for a shift from joint stock companies to cooperatives is so rarely talked about, even on the political left in Britain, I think is very, very sad. One other thought is to do with the church and our role. I speak as an Anglican by background. My wife, many years ago, mid-1980s, she actually worked for the Sunday trading opposition campaign, I probably was called now. Keep Sunday special, that's right. But it seems to me that we do need to have some kind of recognition collectively in the church. And I know obviously many on the call today and and of course many in linked to the LRTC are on board with this. But where do we go to try and achieve the changes that we want? I'm going to say a bit more, but I won't dwell now on the links, particularly with food system and land use. But I want to hear more about that.
More on that later.
Workshop in a second.
Choose that. Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much. Yeah. Miriam, so there's a number of practitioners now at the kind of sharp end of things. And Miriam, tell us a little bit about the Santa Marta Group and your perspective on the Jubilee.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was interesting to hear so much talk about slavery this evening. And I'm going to be talking in the breakout room about modern slavery, essentially. So the Santa Marta Group is a charity. We're working to end human trafficking and modern slavery. And the approach is by connecting leaders in the church, law enforcement, government, and civil society across all continents. We were set up in 2014 with the commission of Pope Francis, and we continue in his legacy, aiming to be leaders of hope, leaders in the construction of a better world, and aiming ultimately to challenge the culture of indifference towards human suffering. So we work largely at that leadership level to influence policy internationally, but we also work domestically to raise the awareness of communities in collaboration with the likes of Caritas and Justice and Peace, and that's a really, really important pillar of our work. Human trafficking is a crime that's inextricably linked with questions of economic justice, and there's so much I could talk about for hours on that. There are an estimated 50 million victims across the world, and as many as 130,000 in the UK. Each year, human trafficking is generating criminal profits of around $236 billion globally. So that makes it the second most lucrative crime. And if these criminal profits were the GDP of a nation, then human trafficking would be the 53rd richest global economy. So that's a huge amount of money, and much of it is inevitably passing through our financial institutions. All of that made from the exploitation of vulnerable people. So big questions for us to challenge. And we'll be talking in our breakout session about the causes and types of human trafficking, what's affecting the UK specifically. And then we'll be thinking collectively about what we can do to kind of resist the structures which allow this crime to thrive. So hopefully we'll learn a bit, but we'll also be looking at positive actions. So no one should leave feeling too helpless or hopeless, I hope. And if you don't join the breakout session with me this evening, then Paul will be sending around some resources, I think. So please feel free to get in touch with any questions, particularly if you want to do any awareness-raising work on this. Thank you.
And all the links in the chat as well. I'll make sure they're harvested. Yeah. Thank you, Miriam. Yeah. So if you want to hear more about the work of the Santa Marta Group, choose that breakout group. Phoebe, tell us about CAFOD's campaign briefly, and then you can go on, hear a bit more if you want to join her group.
Sure. So CAFOD is focused on cancelling the debt in this Jubilee year. And it's something that we worked on in the kind of big debt campaign in the year 2000, and very sadly, obviously, coming back to it now, but sort of viewing it as building on the success of that. And so I can talk a bit about some of the specifics of how the UK can play a role in that, and why it's very important that we can lobby the UK government specifically, and then what exactly we're planning in terms of this year and our timeline for that, as well as ongoing things that you can get involved with.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Thank you. Naomi from Christians Against Poverty.
Hello, everyone. I am from Christians Against Poverty. One of the things that I've loved this evening is the talk of Shabbat and the talk of Kingdom of Heaven, and actually Tim touched on it lightly, the role that the church has in that, and that is the thing that I'm going to be focusing on in my breakout group, is the calling that I really believe the church has to step into the year of Jubilee on a daily basis, to bring hope to the poor, the vulnerable, and the ostracized. And when we look at who Jesus spent his time with, he deliberately chose to spend his time with those that would otherwise have been marginalized and excluded, and brought them into community, working to eradicate poverty, both material, but spiritual and relational as well. At the minute, we're partnering with over 1,000 churches across the UK, and the heart of our resources, the heart of CAP, is to see people set free from all types of poverty. And I'm going to go through the practical ways that you can do that in my breakout session. So please come and join me. And likewise, if you're split, get in touch with me afterwards, and I'd love to have a one-on-one with you.
Yes, sadly, there's only time for one. Okay, thank you, Naomi. And finally, last but not least, John Paul. I mentioned you last because I think you have your outfit has the knack of bringing everything together at local level. So tell us about Journey to 2030.
Thank you. Yeah, so Journey to 2030 was a project that our charity, the Ecological Conversion Group, started really, I think, it's been mentioned that the church, the commons, the need for the commons. This is, how do we see the church as the commons? How do we see the church as the place where this new economy can develop naturally, and the great potential that the church has in this, if it really took its mission seriously. So I think we'll be looking at in the breakout room, what is the mission of the church and how is it connected to Jubilee? How is the ecological conversion this daily Jubilee, and how does integral ecology, how these things are all basically the same thing. And I think what really struck me from today is Professor Bruni talks a lot about time, which is something that we don't talk about enough. Because when we talk about time, it's always things like education in the future or investment in solutions, and or even when we look at indulgences, which was curiously absent from the discussion, we tend to put everything into the future rather than stopping and taking a good hard look at ourselves now. So we'll be discussing some of this in the next bit.
Thanks very much. I think at this point we may need to say goodbye to Luigino. Thank you very much for joining us and for everything that you've shared.
Thank you. Thanks to you. I hope to I don't know, I have the chance to say something useful to you, because we don't know enough. Usually this kind of meeting will be preceded by a moment of knowledge, because otherwise we talk coming from the sky. But we did our best, and maybe some that can be a starting point for a new journey together somehow in UK. I was studying in Norwich, University of East Anglia, for my PhD. I feel UK part of my story, my person. I also, if you come to Rome to the Congress too, that would be with Paul, but all of you, we will be very happy to continue what we started this evening.
Well, we must make sure to share those opportunities, and also the what Henrique shared with us. So thank you very much, and enjoy your dinner. Thank you. You've earned it. So I don't know if you're going here, Henrique, but thank you too if you need to head off. I know they're an hour behind us, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for the speakers in our groups there, for what you contributed. I'm sorry it was so short. But I'd like to invite Barbara to tell us a little bit about Green Christian, and then also John. I think John's here, isn't he? Yeah. About the particular Join Enough project and what that does, what that stands for. Barbara, over to you.
Okay, well, Green Christian is a group of ordinary Christians. We come from all different church backgrounds, very ecumenical. We literally have, we've got also from the Orthodox Church, the Evangelical, the Catholics, the Anglicans, the Methodists, etc. And we work mainly with prayer, action, and encouragement, where we try to think how our ministry works. And we try to look to see what is lacking in the world of Christianity and Christian groups, and in the environment, what's happening in the world, and look and see if we can add anything and help. So when 5 years ago, we started thinking about the climate and the anxiety that was causing, we set up our Borrowed Time program. We recently set up a food project, which Tim is leading on and led the workshop on just now, revamping our loaf project, which is local, organic, animal-friendly, fairly traded. But 25 years on from when that was started, we felt we should really look at that again and revise it. We like to look upon ourselves as a community, and we very much welcome members to join us. And one of the things we do is put on a lot of Zoom programs which enable us to reach people not only in the UK, but all around the world. And it's been lovely to have all of you with us tonight. So thank you. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Barbara. John, joining up. Oh, I don't think we can hear you. Well, let me explain. Perhaps joining up is one of the projects of Green Christian, which is modelling, looking at, seeking to promote thinking, challenges to the current economic status quo, pretty much along the line, as I say, of what Ian was outlining, and likewise the Economy of Francesco. So we're kind of the almost like the British branch of Economy of Francesco. We would be honoured if we were thought of as that. There's monthly workshops that happen, which bring in people not just like Henrique and Luigino, but people from around the country here in the UK as well, who can help to develop fresh thinking. And there's a website, which maybe, John, you could just post that in the chat, as a dedicated website for joining up as well. Sorry, hope I did it justice, John. And Caritas Diocese of Nottingham, one of the dioceses in membership of the Caritas Social Action Network nationally, and here to support particularly people in the Diocese of Nottingham in the East Midlands across all of the issues that we've been looking at tonight, and foster action locally. That's our business concluded. So I'll just close with a prayer. This is the final words of the Jubilee prayer that is commended to those of us from the Catholic tradition by Pope Francis, in fact, for the 2025 year. May the grace of Jubilee reawaken in us as pilgrims of hope, a yearning for the treasures of heaven, but may that same grace spread the joy and peace of our Redeemer throughout the earth. To you, our God, eternally blessed, be glory and praise forever. Amen. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. It's been a long evening, but you've persevered, and I think there's been a huge amount of learning. Thank you again to all our speakers. I'll let you get off and enjoy the rest of what's left of your evening. Thank you for keeping it up.